All right, everyone. Thanks for coming back in so quickly and so orderly. Actually, I don't need to be up there. I'll get out of the way. Okay, so again, in case you didn't hear me before, there are snacks on the back table, generously donated by a participant who had to leave, so help yourself. I am going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Dr. Lauren Heathcote. Dr. Lauren Heathcote is an associate professor of health psychology at King's College London. Her research sits at the interface of pain psychology and medicine, having completed a Ph.D. in experimental psychology at the University of Oxford and a 5-year postdoctoral fellowship in pain medicine at Stanford University School of Medicine. Dr. Heathcote was a 2003 winner of the Ulf Lindblom Young Investigator Prize for Clinical Pain Science and the Hirumi Kawano New Investigator Award in Psycho-Oncology, and the Children Young Investigator Award in Child Health. So please welcome Dr. Heathcote.
Thank you. I should clarify that's the 2023 award, because I'd be a lot older if I won it in 2003. It's such a privilege to be here. This is the first time that I am joining and attending the San Diego Pain Summit. But I did spend 5 years of my life living in beautiful Northern California, and it's just such a pleasure to come back here. I really count California as a second home in my heart. I have been really blown away by the talks here over the last couple of days, and particularly the power of bringing in lived experience and the co-design process and the power of storytelling. I'm looking at Felicity, who gave a wonderful talk all on that yesterday, and Joletta's amazing talk as well on the first day, which really, I think, showcased that power. So I, yesterday afternoon and into the evening, decided to revamp my talk a little bit. I was originally going to talk about some of the work that has led up to an intervention that we've been working on and that we've been co-designing with our wonderful young lived experience advisors who've all had an experience of childhood cancer. And I was just going to sort of briefly allude to it because it's still very much in the works. But after seeing all of the brilliant stuff presented this week, I decided to showcase this for the very first time. So you guys are going to see this for the first time. No one outside of our lab has seen it. And I'm going to talk about the co-design process we've been going through. And I thought it would be a wonderful audience as well to start sparking some discussion about what we've been creating for this population and how it might be relevant for other populations living with pain. So thank you in advance for being my guinea pigs for that. So when we think about placebo effects, we tend to think of them in the context of the randomized controlled trial. So in this context, we pit our new drugs, our new medical treatments against a placebo pill or a placebo condition. And the goal there is to see if this new drug, this new treatment, outperforms the placebo. So in this model, if we see that our drug has outperformed the placebo, then we're elated. Our new drug that's often cost millions, sometimes billions of dollars to develop, has worked. And then when we take it into the clinic, we forget all about the placebo effect and the role that it played. If our drug doesn't outperform the placebo, our hopes and dreams are dashed. And after those millions or billions of dollars, we say it was just a placebo effect after all. Now, this is a good model to test the efficacy of new drugs and new treatments. But in reality, what's really happening is that within every effect of our drug, of our treatment, lies the placebo effect. The placebo effect is active and working when we deliver any medical treatment. We know in some cases the placebo effect is very large. So in antidepressants, it's been estimated to be between 80 and 85%. In other treatments, it plays a very small role. So in antibiotics, we know that the placebo effect is about 10 to 15%. And And so this leads us to really taking on the integrated model, or what we like to call the what's really going on model, where we see this placebo effect as active and working within every treatment. And this leads us to ask more sophisticated questions like, well, what's really driving this so-called placebo effect? And we see this in a few different ways. So one is the body's natural ability to heal. This is really important and shouldn't be overlooked. Another is the mindsets that we hold, our thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations, our assumptions about the way things work in the world. And we're starting to see that our mindsets, in part, have action through shaping the body's natural healing abilities. The social context is a really important part of this effect. So, the doctor that's in front of us, how much do we trust that doctor? Do they seem warm? Do they seem competent? What have the people around us told us about this new treatment, about this condition? What has media told us? And then lastly, our learning, our previous history, our previous experiences, trying new treatments, our previous experiences with our body, with the healthcare system. And of course, these all work in concert together to shape things. So our mindsets don't exist in a vacuum. They are often shaped by the social context and by what we've learned. So for a while now, people have been talking about, well, maybe we can actively harness placebo effects to boost and maximize our overall treatment efficacy. Rather than ignoring them, we bring them in. But a lot of people have been talking about this in terms of sort of administering a placebo pill to a patient as an active treatment. So the clinical utility of that placebo effect has long hinged on this idea of deceptively administering a placebo pill. But if we know that the power of this placebo doesn't reside in the sham treatment, but it comes from the psychosocial forces that surround the patient and the treatment, that, I think, gives us new, better targets for leveraging these effects ethically in modern healthcare. So I'm going to talk today a bit about what we call in our lab mindsets. You could also call these core beliefs, but we see them as sort of sitting in the middle of personality. So personality is very, very stable, trait-like factors that are very hard to shift. And then expectations. So expectations are often about very specific things, like, I think this treatment will work for me. Mindsets kind of sit in the middle of those. They tend to be core beliefs about the way something works in the world rather than a specific treatment. And that kind of makes them potentially easier to change than something like personality, but maybe more impactful than a specific expectation. So we have mindsets about a lot of things that matter in the context of healthcare. We have mindsets about the treatments and what symptoms mean. Are treatments overall effective for my condition? Are my symptoms positive signals or negative signals? We have mindsets about our illnesses. So, for example, do you see a diagnosis of cancer as a catastrophe or as something that's manageable or could even be an opportunity to make important life changes? We have mindsets about our body, and I'm going to talk a lot about our work in this area today, and I feel like Tasha's talk really set the stage for a lot of the stuff that we've also been working on. Do you see your body as something that's working against you, as an adversary, or something that's working for you, as capable and competent? And we have mindsets about our care team. Does my doctor get it? Are they competent? And do they get me? Are they warm? One thing that I think is particularly important is that our mindsets are rarely right or wrong, or true or false. And that's because they're about things that are inherently complex. So unlike a specific expectation, where you can be right or wrong about whether this thing will work for you, they're often about these bigger constructs, like the meaning of illness or the meaning of your body. And that means that even though they're not right or wrong, they can be impactful. They're the lens through which we make sense of a complex reality. So I had the pleasure when I was a postdoc at Stanford of joining a second lab. My primary lab was in the pain medicine department, but I also joined Aaliyah Crum's mind and body lab in the psychology department. And she's been doing some phenomenal work looking at how our mindsets shape our health outcomes. Some of her early work looked at mindsets about stress. Do you see stress as something that makes you sick and weak? Or do you see stress as something that makes you grow and learn and reach for your goals? And we have scientific evidence that both are true. So our mindsets can play a big role here. And she found that helping to teach people that actually stress is not only debilitating, but it can sometimes be enhancing, had a much bigger impact on health outcomes than the amount of stress that someone was experiencing, and even shown some really exciting findings on things like longevity. And that's what got me really excited, particularly about mindsets, is that they are mutable, they are changeable, because sort of both ends of the spectrum are often true within any life experience. We can help people often broaden their horizons and see that full spectrum, and this might be helpful and therapeutic. And this is a wonderful book called The Handbook of Wise Interventions, which really focuses on how to identify and harness adaptive mindsets in lots of different contexts. There's one chapter I love, which is about harnessing the mindset that you belong when you start university or college. And they've shown that if you can help young Black students have that mindset that they belong when they start university, then this can drastically reduce the racial achievement gap, as well as long-term career outcomes. So let's think about how some of these mindsets in the context of healthcare and medicine. So I'm going to tell you now about a study that Ali ran in her lab with the lead author, Lauren Heathcote, who was a postdoc at the time, all about trying to shape mindsets about symptoms of a treatment. So the model they used was quite a new treatment approach that exists in the context of food allergies. It's called oral immunotherapy. And the idea here is that you can take someone from having a very severe food allergy, like a peanut allergy, and very, very slowly over time, gradually expose their immune system to the allergen. This happens over about 6 months. And across that time, the immune system actually learns that this is a safe thing and no longer has such a severe reaction. So you can take someone from eating a sort of speck of peanut dust in that first week to eating a whole Snickers bar 6 months later. One of the challenges about this treatment is that people often drop out. And part of that is because when they're going through the treatment, they often experience the kinds of symptoms that they've been so scared about their whole lives. Things like itchy throat, congestion. And that's because the treatment is activating their immune system. And these mild symptoms are not just a sort of unhelpful byproduct, but they're actually a sign that the child's immune system is switching on and learning how to fight off peanuts. So Ali and her team decided to see if they could shape these mindsets about symptoms in the context of this treatment. So in one condition, there was 24 families where they allocated to the symptoms as side effects group. And this is sort of standard of care in oral immunotherapy. So young people are told that they might experience these side effects, these symptoms as part of their treatment. And these are just unfortunate side effects of treatment, and they're given helpful information about how to manage those side effects. And then in the symptoms as positive signals group, they told these young people that You're going to experience potentially some side effects, some symptoms as part of this treatment. But actually, these are a sign that your immune system is switching on and learning how to tolerate peanuts. In both cases, the young people got the same kinds of health information about sort of things like managing side effects, when to report any side effects of concern, and that was very clearly told to them. But the framing, the kind of mindsets around what these symptoms meant was subtly changed. And this was done through meeting with the families at the start of treatment, but also subtle things like having leaflets, reinforcing this message differently, little fridge magnets, for example, that would say things like, my body's getting stronger. And I just want to show a couple of short clips of the young people who took part in this study to show how that sort of mindset shifted in their own words. So this is a young guy who was in the symptoms as side effects group, so that sort of standard treatment of care group.
And so what advice would you give to future kids who are going to go through this treatment who might be worried about their symptoms?
Advice to future kids would probably be just to follow the procedures that you tell them, and also, just hang in there.
It's pretty good advice, follow the medical procedures and really hang in there. What about a young person in the symptoms as positive signals group?
So what advice would you give for future kids who are going to go through this treatment who might be feeling kind of afraid that they're going to have symptoms? How would you tell them to think about their symptoms?
When you have a symptom, it is actually meaning that your body is fighting off peanuts.
So wonderful example of really embracing this mindset. So what happened? Well, they found that kids in the symptoms as positive signals group were less worried, reported less worry when they had these side effects across the treatment. They also contacted staff less about symptoms, and this was primarily driven by the parents. And they also looked at a biomarker of treatment efficacy. So this is IgG4 levels, and high levels here mean that the treatments had a better response, that the young person's showing a sort of better tolerance of peanuts. And they found that those kids in that symptoms as positive signals group showed a significantly better response to the treatment. So following from this, Carrie Leibowitz, Lauren Heathcote, and Ali wrote a wonderful paper on whether changing mindsets about side effects might be an ethical way to harness these placebo or nocebo effects within healthcare. There have been several studies now looking at this approach within the context of different treatments. And I'm going to briefly talk about one extra study that we did when COVID-19 became a thing, and we were wondering about what research we should do that was meaningful at that time. And this is another example where having a vaccine against something like COVID-19 often has side effects. But those side effects are not really created by the vaccine. They're created by your own immune system, switching on and building tolerance and able to fight that condition. So symptoms like sort of muscle soreness, aches, fever, headache, and fatigue are all often to do with your own immune system switching on and engaging. So we ran this study in collaboration with Keith Petrie and his group in New Zealand, and we randomized over 528 adults who were coming into a community vaccine site, all receiving, I think, the Pfizer vaccine, to a symptoms as positive signals group or standard of care treatment group. And for this, we worked with an animation company. So again, Felicity's wonderful animations yesterday. I was excited to show you ours. This is a less than 4-minute long animation. And I think this showcases sort of the power of how if you identify the right mindset, you identify the right belief that sort of scaffolds everything else, you can use very brief, very targeted interventions to have a meaningful effect. So I'm just going to show you a quick clip. This is just, I think, 2 minutes from that 4-minute video.
Did you know that vaccines work by triggering your body's natural immune response to protect you from specific germs, like the virus that causes COVID-19? Let's take a closer look at how that happens. The COVID-19 vaccines themselves are like tiny messengers. They contain instructions that tell your cells how to make an imitation of a piece of the virus called the spike protein. When the immune system sees the spike proteins in the instructions, it calls on the body to prepare to fight it as if it's the real virus. This preparation of the immune system is like training soldiers to prepare for battle. The immune system creates strategies to fight the virus and trains its soldiers to latch on to spike proteins and neutralize them. So if your body is exposed to the real virus, it will know exactly how to fight it. Make sure that you don't get infected and are not able to spread the virus to anyone else. Understanding how vaccines really work can help us know why some people experience symptoms after receiving the vaccine. It's common for some to have symptoms such as fever, fatigue, headache, muscle ache, and joint pain in the first few days after getting the vaccine. While it may seem natural to worry about these symptoms, these are actually signs that your body is building immunity, and the vaccine is doing what it was designed to do. If you have a particularly hard workout at the gym, your muscles might feel sore, but that's a sign that your body is getting stronger. Similarly, this vaccine is giving your immune system a workout. This might cause some side effects, but these side effects are a sign that your body is getting stronger and is prepared in case it encounters the virus. Some people may not experience any symptoms at all. This is okay too. The vaccine is still working and your body is still building immunity. Everyone is different, and we all respond differently to the immune system training that is going on in the body. It's important to know that your body is working hard to recognize and defeat the COVID virus, and is growing stronger to prevent you from getting sick if you are exposed to it. Knowing that these symptoms are positive signals that the vaccine is working and the body is building immunity can make these side effects easier to handle. Of course, if your symptoms are more than you can handle, or if they last more than a few days, you should reach out to your doctor.
Okay. So, what did we find? Well, firstly, we found that those who watched the video increased in their endorsement of that symptoms as positive signals mindset. They reported fewer immediate side effects, so that's in that 15-minute wait period while they're sitting in the waiting room afterwards. And they reported a significantly less worry about those side effects 3 days later. And lastly, we saw a small but significant shift in patients' willingness to have future vaccines. So those who believed that their symptoms are positive signals said that they'd be more likely to have a future vaccine or a booster vaccine. Again, this was a very small shift, and this was a community sample that were already coming in for the vaccine. But I think, if we can leverage very brief interventions to have a shift on something as important as this, then I'm excited about that. And we finally did some mediation analysis to show that the change in that mindset was sort of driving those shifting intentions to vaccinate. Okay, so my sort of real passion is people who live with chronic illness, and I've been studying several different populations since my Ph.D. and through my postdoc and since starting our lab in London, including people living with chronic pain, people who've had an experience of cancer as well. So one of the questions I've had through doing some of this early work and learning about Ali's work is, how can we use this understanding to help people who have chronic conditions? And there, in some cases, the symptoms as positive signals mindset might be a helpful target. So, for example, if people are starting a new treatment, it might be helpful for sort of tolerance and management of worry around that treatment. But in many cases, I think what we actually want to do here is help people to reflect on and think about their mindsets about their body. And one of the contexts that I've been doing most of my work on so far has been in both younger and older people who've had an experience of cancer. So we're at this really critical point now where we've just reached the threshold that over 50% of people who have a cancer diagnosis now will survive their disease. And that number will keep getting higher as we have better treatments and better precision medicine. The trouble is that means we now have a growing population of people living a lot longer after cancer. And living with the physical and mental health consequences of their cancer experience. And two of the major things that people face after cancer is, firstly, fear and anxiety around things like, will my cancer come back? But also, what can my body help support me do in my life going forward? And we're seeing more and more evidence that people can have persistent physical symptoms for many years or decades after cancer treatment. The primary thing that's been studied and what we tend to see as sort of top is chronic fatigue. And then second to that, and in some populations, it's the top concern is chronic pain. And I think that mindsets about the body might be important and might help us to empower people to cope with not only the mental but also those physical health challenges after cancer. I mentioned earlier that mindsets help us make sense of a complex and uncertain reality. And it might be that sort of doing interventions around these mindsets are most powerful at moments of uncertainty. So at the moment of a new diagnosis or starting a new treatment. For a lot of people who have cancer, that time comes when they finish treatment. They're on this treadmill of their treatment, their process, going through scans and checkups. And then when they finish treatment, they sort of face this precipice of a sudden loss of clinical support, this new normal, both in terms of what their life looks like and what their body looks like and feels like, and deep uncertainty about the future. And during my postdoc, we did some work looking at uncertainty around the body and around things like pain in younger cancer survivors. These are a few quotes from one of the studies that we published. One young patient said, I have a headache. Does that mean my tumor's back, or does it just mean that I have a headache? Another said, there's that precarious line that we all walk, not wanting to be a paranoid mess on one side and being vigilant on the other. And lastly, it doesn't matter how much you tell yourself you're being irrational and the pain is probably nothing. The mind eventually wins over reason. And then we also see, I think, through some of our studies, and this is actually through some of our co-design work with our lived experience advisors, this shift in mindset about the body. So one young advisor said, why did my body almost turn on itself? It had betrayed me. And someone else said, that thought's something that's very difficult to come to terms with because then you can't trust your body. It's not there for you. It's working against you. And I'm sure that many of you in the room have heard similar things from people living with pain that isn't a consequence of cancer. Why has my body turned against me? Why is it I'm creating this pain? So Sean Zion, as part of his Ph.D. work with Ali's team, created a scale to try and capture a couple of the mindsets that they thought were sort of most important and potentially most influential within the context of chronic illness. It's called the Body Mindset Inventory. There are various different versions. Here is the example of the cancer version. So you can see here that the word sort of cancer is in some of these items. So in the category, my body is an adversary. One example is, having cancer means that my body has failed, or my body is to blame for having cancer. And then there's two other mindsets that are captured potentially on that more sort of adaptive end of that spectrum. So, my body is able to cope with cancer and its treatment, or handle cancer and its treatment. And lastly, this mindset that the body is responsive, that it has these remarkable self-healing properties, and it can recover, it can get stronger, and it can heal. We also have a pain version, and essentially you can use this scale to adapt it to whatever population that you're looking at. And I do think that mindsets about the body is something that's been somewhat overlooked in pain science so far. As psychologists, we've done a really good job of capturing thoughts and beliefs about the pain, and maybe also thoughts and beliefs about yourself and your future. But I think we can do an even better job of understanding how does pain shape your beliefs about your body, what your body is capable of, what it can do to support you. And these are just some images drawn by people with chronic pain, which I think show that pain is often not just about the part of the body where you have that pain, but it can be a whole body experience. This is some sort of preliminary measure development work that Sean Zion led for his Ph.D. In 400 adults who had different kinds of chronic conditions or no chronic condition. One thing that has really struck me from this work is that our mindsets about our body are not just markers of our objective reality. So, we saw that people who don't have a chronic illness sometimes report the mindset that their body is an adversary and working against them, whereas people that have all kinds of debilitating illnesses can hold the mindset that their body is capable and supports them and is able to recover and heal. We also don't tend to see very big differences between different conditions. And here really, I think the message is that the differences within a condition and between individuals is far greater than the differences between conditions. My wonderful PhD student, Emily, used this scale in a sample of just over 100 childhood cancer survivors. And she saw something very similar. She saw a really big spread with the kinds of mindsets that these young survivors were holding about their bodies. And she found that particularly that mindset that the body is an adversary, it's to blame for having had cancer, was associated with reporting more pain. And she also did some structural equation modeling. This is all cross-sectional data, but what we're interested in is whether one way in which our mindsets might have an influence on how we cope with something like pain might be in instigating this sort of what we call bodily threat monitoring, so that constant cycle of needing to be vigilant for changes in the body and signs and symptoms that maybe a pain flare is coming on, for example. So, of course, if we think that these mindsets might be important, the best way of knowing that is to see if we can change them. And if so, is that helpful? So this is where I'm going to tell you about our new intervention that we've been developing. And this really is leveraging most of these effects that have come from social psychology around sort of wise intervention strategies. So the idea here is that you target these core beliefs that are important in that context, and you do so at moments of uncertainty. So in our case, this is as young people are finishing their cancer treatment. And we received a grant from the Medical Research Foundation back in the UK to develop a body mindset intervention, both with and then also for young survivors with pain. And we're working with the Royal Marsden Cancer Hospital as part of this work. So this is our brilliant lived experience advisory panel. We have 6 young people who have been generous enough to share their experiences of cancer, their experiences of how their mindsets about their body shifted as a consequence of cancer, and have really been co-researchers and co-producers in developing this intervention. I think Felicity's comment was a really good one yesterday that diversity in lived experience panels can be challenging. It took us, I think, 1 week to find our 2 young white women to work with, and it took us 9 months to find the other young people, young men and young people of colour, and to build the relationships with them so that they would be willing to work with us on this. We also, within the intervention, you'll see we feature clinical experts, so 2 pediatric oncologists, one here in the US, one in the UK, who bring decades of experience treating young patients. And we also feature in the films 2 psychological scientists, one of which is me, and I recognize I'm wearing the same outfit. And this helps to sort of bring that sort of science and the rigor of the psychological science into the intervention. So we went through a 9-month co-design process, and this involved finding our patient partners. And when we did that was we scoured social media to try and find young people who, had been brave enough to put a video online or talk to a charity about their cancer experience. And we reached out to them through social media, through email, through anything we could find. And then we met with them online over a series of 9 months to talk about the project, to talk about what we wanted to do, our sort of initial ideas of creating these sort of documentary-style films. And we actually had a very initial early idea, and what we got the funding for was to develop animations, but our young people immediately told us, no, they need to see real faces of real people who've gone through this experience, so that they can really feel like they get it and that they get them. And then through that, we created a scaffold for what our intervention would look like. So the intervention is made up of a series of small documentary-style films that are paired with reflection exercises. And this can all be done digitally and remotely. Another thing our young advisors told us was they don't want to go back into the hospital to get help for things like mental health and pain. They spent too much time in the hospital, and they want stuff that they can use in their own home or as they move for university and for work. So there's 3 different modules in the intervention. The first module really focuses on introducing young people to this idea of mindsets, this idea that we have mindsets, and that when we experience something big in our life, sometimes that can shift our mindsets, and that's a very normal thing. We introduce the core mindset that we're targeting, which is this mindset that my body is capable. It's capable of supporting me in a life that I want to live after cancer. And then in module 2, we address sort of some challenges and setbacks that young people might face. So even if, you're brought into this idea that, hey, like my mindset, might matter here, and something I have control over after so many years of not having control over things like my treatment, my diagnosis, you'll still face challenges and setbacks along the way. You'll still face evidence that your body maybe wasn't capable of doing that thing that you tried, or that your pain is still there. And so we talk about the role of mindsets in these moments, and here we're taking much more of what we call a meta-mindset approach. So unlike in those other studies, like the COVID study and the allergy study, where we're really trying to give evidence for an alternative mindset, here what we do is we teach someone that they have mindsets, that neither are true nor false, but which you choose to harness in the moments that you feel like you can harness them, they have an impact. And then lastly, the final module, which is several weeks later, is on looking to the future and thinking a little bit about why now? Why is now a good time or an opportunity to build a better relationship with my body that's going to set me up for my future going forward? And then in the last bit, they write a letter. They could write it to their past self or their future self, or they could write it to a sort of made-up young person who will be finishing treatment. After we scaffolded the intervention, we then toured the country. This was one of the most fun periods of my life. We paired up with a film company called JDK Films, and our young people are spread all over the UK, and that's something we're really proud of, is that they represent real diversity in terms of income and geography of the UK. So we would meet the film crew on a sort of Saturday morning at 6:00, and we would go off to Leeds and go off to Liverpool and film our wonderful patient partners in their homes, talking about their mindsets, about their body. And we also filmed them using their bodies in ways that they normally do and that they find meaningful. So things like singing or sort of walking with their family. Okay, so I'm going to have a few clips to show. As I said, this is the first time anyone's seen this, and we're still very much in the active editing phase. So much so that I think there's some images, sort of stock images, that still have watermarks on them. But I wanted to show them here and sort of get some early insights and thoughts and feedback on them, including, most importantly, whether this is something that could be useful for people that don't just have an experience of cancer, but have pain for all sorts of different reasons. So the intervention is called Embody, Exploring Mindsets About the Body. The first clip I have is from film 4, which is about living with uncertainty. And here you'll see some of our young advisors talking about that uncertainty that they live with in their body after cancer.
So having cancer generally does make you more hyper-aware about changes in your body. So a lump in your body or like a new mole that you've developed. I think there's always that underlying fear of, is it my cancer? Is it another cancer that's come back?
But there is trigger points, and those trigger points can be things like, oh, I've got a bruise. Is it sore? Did I bang that? And then, slowly it is coming back down to earth and making that irrational thought of the cancer's back, I've got a bruise.
When I knew what was coming and I knew I was going to have an MRI, especially around my head and neck, even the thought of it could bring me to tears.
That one experience before, where I had the call from my doctor being like, there's something worrying on your scan. I remember that. I remember being like, okay, so my fears have come to life, so what am I going to do now?
In many studies done by our research team and others around the world, we found that worries are a normal part of life after cancer. During challenging moments, your mindsets are especially important. There are struggles, very real emotions, and there can be massive uncertainties. But each of these challenges can be an opportunity to check in with your mindsets. Stop and ask yourself, am I seeing my body as incapable or working against me? And if yes, what can I do to start adopting more useful mindsets?
Maybe we have some unusual sensations. Maybe we have some weird, ambiguous symptoms. That's when our body mindsets are likely to matter a lot, because we're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to make meaning of what's happening to us. And our mindsets are one of the things that's going to guide our interpretations of our experience.
Recognizing your mindset, even if you're currently in a very negative place, is a victory. The good news is that you don't need to force yourself to feel better. Simply recognize that you might be feeling this way, in part because of the mindset you're in. Remember, other mindsets exist, and you could choose a more helpful way of thinking, like the mindset that your body is trustworthy and capable.
Your body is completely a trustworthy vessel. Now that the cancer is gone, remember what that vessel is. It has so much capacity to carry you forward, and your job is to find that body that you used to have before your cancer experience. And remember what it feels like to be strong and to trust your body.
Okay, I wanted to just put this slide up afterwards. So later in this film, we talk very explicitly about what to do if a young person has a symptom that they might be worried about. One of the things that we've talked a lot about in this work is we want to make sure that we don't make young people feel so safe in their body that they think, oh, there's no chance my cancer will come back, or there's no chance I'm going to have any consequences of it, because that's not the medical reality. And what we actually find is that if young people hold their mindset that their body isn't capable, that often makes them not come forward with symptoms they're worried about because they don't feel like their body can handle more treatment. So we talk here more about what to do if you are concerned, and really to sort of quickly tell someone about it, and that actually might help stop this spiral of worry about your body. And then in the next clip, this might be the last one I can show you, maybe I can show one more. This is from film 5, and this is from that module on the long and winding road, so facing setbacks and challenges. And you'll see our young advisors talking a little bit about their lived experience of pain and how having had pain after cancer, has sort of shifted their mindset about their body. And really the core goals here are to make sure that a young person watching this feels seen, that their worries are normalized, and that they feel validated.
It wasn't until, I think, early days of remission, I think that you start to feel a bit more active. I think that's when the impact of what you could do now suddenly hits you.
Even today, 3 years after finishing treatment, I still suffer with really bad pain in my left leg and down my back, and it's caused the muscles in my left leg to seize up, like they're really tight, which means I can't get this leg straight for the life of me. That's something I never had to worry about before.
Pain has followed me right through my journey, even to now, when, yes, the hips are replaced, but the shoulder keeps me up at night. I have to take strong painkillers for that. Sometimes I can't do certain things, like closing the boot of my car, and that irritates me because I think, it's still there, that reminder's still there.
So I've got stage 4 kidney failure, which is nearly at stage 5, and I can't at this current moment have a transplant because of my recent diagnoses. So when I got the 15% blood test result, it was quite a shock.
Chemo goes round and it destroys everything. So even now my body's still building back to where it was, although I don't think it's ever going to get there. I have to adapt to this new normality, which is life.
I'm going to pause it there because I in the last minute, I think I'm a minute over, I want to show how sort of normalizing and validating these experiences is only the first part of the intervention. The most important piece is that we also showcase these young people talking about how they've managed to find mindsets that are helpful for them, and how they've managed to use their bodies in ways to support them, really showcasing how sort of mindsets can be important and to empower individuals. And the last clip I'll just show is from one part of that later in that same film.
Dance has brought so much more than just being able to dance. It's brought lifelong friendships, it's brought so much support, it's brought a different focus. It's basically given me a commitment, a sense of self. You do have days where you wake up and you can be frustrated and you think, is my body capable? Or today it might be limited, and you might get a bit mad at yourself, which is being mad at your body for being that way and thinking, why has this happened? Why do I have to be in this position compared to my peers who are working, who have got relationships, who can go and travel, they can independently go do things, whereas I can't in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you've kind of got to put into perspective again of what can I actually do.
I have to know what my limits are, and then my whole life is basically planned around what my limits are. I'm able to drive, and I actually learned to drive when I was on chemotherapy, and that's probably one of my huge wins that I'm proud of. And driving is how I manage to get to everywhere that I go to, because I can't take public transport because of my brain injury affects my coordination and my balance.
So having my animals has been a big kind of mental reliever for me. So they've always been there. They always kind of cheer up my day, seeing them play around. But on top of mentally helping me, I think physically, they've also helped me in ways because having to take Jimmy on walks, that's always pushed me to do more exercise, even when I was, not very physically strong.
Second, try new things. Can you find new ways of using your body and living your life in a way that's meaningful and brings you joy? Could you test the edges of your body's limits?
Okay, and you'll see then it will go through various other steps, like how do I maintain this mindset that my body is capable, so that you saw young people talking about keep doing the things you like to do, try new things with your body, sort of find support in others is one of those pieces. You don't have to do this alone. Talk about your body with other people. Talk about their bodies with them, and make this a sort of shared experience. Okay, so we will be wrapping up these films, so the final stages of testing over the next month, and then launching a trial to see if these films help young people. So launching that in May. We're working with several different hospital and charity partners to capture a diverse group of young people as our participants. And, I want to sort of end by saying that I think it's important to think about how our understanding of placebo effects, has informed this idea that actually our brains and our minds have a lot of power in the way we live our lives. But what is most important for me beyond the placebo effect is whether we can help to rebuild people's trust in their body, and particularly in their body's capacity to support them in living a valued and meaningful life. And I'm quite convinced that this might have power beyond the context that we've been studying already, but to other contexts as well. And thank you. I'm going to leave on a slide thing here. If you hold your camera up to this, it will take you to a screen where I'm hoping at some point, maybe in the break, people can put in some words about what you hope people with pain will use to describe their bodies. And this is some very early stage thinking about how we might adapt this intervention for people living with pain as a primary condition or as the consequence of other conditions too. And thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We have a very urgent hand.
Yeah, that is just touching my pediatric heart the whole time. You lived in Northern California, so you can appreciate that. Like, that is good shit. Like, that is good shit. Thank you. Very selfishly, the whole time you're speaking, I cannot help but think about the community around the babies. Like, please give me some type of insight on what the reflections of the parents have been to see their babies be able to do something like this.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of being a parent of a child who's gone through something like this is that you feel a need to protect them. And one of the hardest things, I think, is letting your young person go out and live their life and use their bodies in ways that maybe you don't know if they're capable of. So we're not, within this trial, we're not specifically involving the parents, although we know that parents will see this through enrolling their kids. But we want to see if this is helpful for parents as a standalone, but also can we develop something where we include parents and we talk about, not only their mindsets about their child's bodies, but also their mindsets about their own bodies, and make this more of a family experience.
Hi, thanks so much. I was just wondering when, I guess things that I see in the clinic all the time with people that are suffering and are so desperate to get their lives back, there's this, need for the patient to kind of want to do the right thing. And how did you balance that when, in the sense of mindset? I'm projecting, so I'm guessing some of the populations are like, what's the right mindset? Or how do I do this better or correctly? How did you navigate that, if that happened?
Yeah. And it's something I worry about with this work as well as, the word mindset, we use it in lots of different ways. And I think some of the more kind of negative or toxic ways that we use it are, well, just change your mindset. You're not thinking positively enough. And in those first few films, I didn't show clips of them, we spend quite a bit of time on that. We sort of spend a lot of time sort of saying these mindsets are not true or false. And we use our young advisors to really normalize that thinking that your body has let you down after cancer is a totally normal way to respond. Same thing if your body suddenly develops pain, and that's okay. And I actually think from a research perspective, we don't necessarily think we're going to reduce the mindset that your body is an adversary, but we want to try and boost the other mindsets to exist alongside it as well. So we'll see, but hopefully that message will land with our young people. It's not true or false or right or wrong.
I'm going to stand up. I just come out of a Catholic school background. So I love what you've presented here, and it's absolutely perfect for that client who comes to us and is aching and desperate and hit rock bottom and angry indignation, ready to move forward. But how many times we also see coming into the clinic the person who's, I've got this problem. And then they don't want to play the game. And they don't want to come along. And as I've moved my practice to being online, I found that there's a lot of times I can waste conversation with people who are like, yeah, I have this problem, and it's just my life. They're not ready to take action. So where in the cycle, or where has your awareness become of saying, this is something not to give to somebody who's just dissatisfied with what's going on, unhappy. What was the other steps that I had written down? But looking for, like what I just said, the person who's hit the rock bottom, the person who's got that righteous indignation that we need to do something different, that those you have a greater response with. What kind of responses, or what have you noticed of the difference of all the people out there we can help, but then they go, yeah, no.
Yeah. In our pilot work, we've definitely seen that some young people will go, oh yes, I'm ready for this. Like, this is exactly what I need. And then others will go, I don't think I need this. Like, I'm doing okay. Yes, I've got this problem, but like, I'm fine. I think from one perspective, okay, maybe it's not the right fit for them. What I am excited about in terms of these kinds of digital interventions is that, if you're a clinician sitting with someone in the room, maybe that's not the right moment to get them. And this brings in this wise intervention approach of, well, at some point, maybe there will be a moment. Maybe that person, if even in general they're thinking, I'm doing okay, but there's one moment where they do hit rock bottom, or they do suddenly go, I need something right now. Can we provide something that they could use in that moment, like a sort of vaccine, for future decline? And that's why I'm interested in this, but not as a standalone thing. I think this has to be used alongside in-person, clinical intervention, someone in front of me validating my experiences, also presenting this as something that could be helpful. I think that's going to be important too. But yeah, I think if we can capture people in that moment where they need it most, which doesn't come along all the time, we might have impact.
That was amazing. I can't help but notice a hint of vulnerability on your side. And as somebody else who works in pediatrics, I'm wondering, we of course care for our patients, but are you considering any research on the effect this has on you as the provider? Are you considering, and how do you cope? What do you do for yourself? Because this is hard. Pain is hard in kids. So anyone who's in the room that sees kids, it affects us too. And I'm wondering what you do for that.
It's a great question. I'll be totally raw and honest. So I'm not a clinician, but I am a young cancer survivor myself. And I think that has made this work sometimes quite challenging because it does bring those emotional sort of pieces. For me, I sort of have quite firm boundaries in place in terms of sort of when I do this work, who I share it with. I love sharing this work with you guys, with paying clinicians, because it also means that I don't have to go to the cancer conferences and hear all about cancer. I can just come here and talk all about pain. But yeah, I think there is a vulnerability there. I don't think I have a great answer, but maybe one insight is that it's hard to be vulnerable with young people in front of you, when they need to feel heard and validated. And so again, thinking about how this can be used alongside that in-person intervention, maybe something like this gives a young person space to sort of feel vulnerable, to feel those emotions and have those raw emotions, separately, so that when they can come into clinic with you, they're kind of already willing to talk about the things that you can do, rather than having to have those really difficult discussions and having to validate and normalize sort of in the clinical setting. But I would love your thoughts and others' thoughts on how to do that.
And that's all we have time for this question and answer. So another round of applause, please. And again, one